Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, a place where creatives share their stories. My name is Galina Marquez, and I have another cool story prepared for you today, so let's get to it. Hello everybody and welcome to the next episode of In the Art Scene. And today we are having a very interesting guest who is, I believe, not an artist himself, but an amazing curator who Ron and I had a pleasure to meet in Ojai, California in February, back in February this year when we visited. We stayed about a mile away from the Happy Valley where the Beatrice Wood Center for Arts is located. And Kevin Wallace, who is my guest today, is the director and curator of this place. And he possesses a great knowledge of Beatrice Wood, which blew my mind because I keep discovering for myself these women who were incredibly influential in the art community, and Beatrice is the one to really acknowledge here. So, but let's start with you, Kevin, and why wouldn't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a background of who you are?
Well, you mentioned whether or not I'm an artist, and I encourage everyone to be an artist. I believe that the arts are a way of expanding our perception, and so whether or not I exhibit what I create, I do create things, and I do create music, and I do a lot of creative work.
I did not know that. I'm sorry.
Well, because I don't, I keep pretty low key with that part because my job, of course, is to promote others and to promote Beatrice Wood and her legacy. So, but I do believe if it was up to me, we'd all be steeped in the different creative acts such as art making. I believe it's so important. But to step back, I'm the founding director of the center. I started the center in 2005, so it's been something like 17 years now. The way that came to happen is I wrote a letter to Beatrice Wood many years ago, and I asked her if she would sign my copy of I Shock Myself, which is her autobiography. She sent back a letter, a handwritten letter, inviting me up with this little map of the drive up the mountain, and it was. And so I went up and met her, and I found that she was just this remarkable woman. She had not only a presence, but a generosity of spirit that I can't think of anybody I've ever met that had that sort of generosity of spirit, as though she had nothing better to do with her time than spend time with us. So I was impressed with her history in Dada, which is one of the reasons I went to meet her. I was impressed with her work in ceramics. And I wasn't really expecting this other humanitarian person that she was. So I was so impressed with her, it stuck with me, and we would go back to visit regularly. And then when I started guest curating museum exhibitions, I pitched an exhibition on Beatrice Wood to the Craft and Folk Art Museum in Los Angeles. They accepted it. I did that show, borrowed a lot of things from the Happy Valley Foundation. She left everything to this foundation. And then I was invited by the chairman of the board and his wife to come, and he wanted to know whether I could do what I did in the museum at her home. And so the center was born.
Wow.
So that's what brought me into my current role.
So it sounds like on your part, you were so taken over by her personality and her legacy that that idea kind of stuck with you, and eventually step by step led you to end up being a founding director. So what is that about her legacy, her art, her personality that actually hooked you up so bad?
Right. Well, I think about how do I explain this? Spending so far 17 years of my life really caring for this woman's legacy. And, every weekend I spend time talking about her and telling stories about her, as well as her contemporaries, people that she was involved with, like Marcel Duchamp, the whole Dada movement, as well as others. And also, of course, at the center, we promote a lot of other artists as well. So in a way, I just see eye to eye. I get her. And I feel that she represents something that needs to be shared. Someone it's in a way, it's not even Beatrice Wood. It's who she was, what she stood for, what she was all about, and what she has to offer the world. And not only her, of course, because we're also tied in with this rich history. This woman, Annie Besant, was her hero that started the foundation. And Annie Besant was a female suffragette in England, fought for workers' rights. A friend of Gandhi, fought for India self-rule. And so when I became aware of the larger aspect of Beatrice Wood's life and her involvement with all these people, I was sort of like, these are my people. This is something I can get behind and do, and which is unusual for me because I'm not a joiner. I'm nonpartisan, non-sectarian. I'm not going to buy into anything or join any clubs, but I just really felt so aligned with her and such. So that's what was happening.
Well, I believe that everyone has that something. I guess you can call it calling, right? So even if it's not necessarily conventional or like popular, like you said, you're nonpartisan. Like we don't really have to divide ourselves to two parties here and there, or like this is my set of values, this is your set of values. There's something for everyone, and this is actually I wish there were more people like you who were following legacies like Beatrice Wood, because what she stood for was absolutely like it blew my mind. You gave us a really lovely tour, and you talked about her life, and we read a little bit about her biography. And I was under impression that during her life, she was involved in so many movements that you mentioned, Dada. She was in the circle of famous artists. She was involved with Marcel Duchamp for quite a while, romantically. But she did not make a living off of her art. And but nonetheless, later in life, she became very, very influential.
Right. Well, she struggled financially all her life. I always tell people the best way to understand Beatrice Wood's character is the film Titanic, because James Cameron very obviously took her relationship with her mother, wanting her to be proper society and marry a rich man and all of that, to tell that story of the young Rose. So she was rebellious and she wanted to do it her way, and she did. She walked away from the family money, and then took the path of an artist and an actress, where like 1% or 0.5% of people actually make money doing that. The rest of them struggle financially, and want to stay true to their art. And it's true, she barely squeaked by her entire life until the age of 86, when she got a great dealer, Garth Clark, who started giving her exhibitions every year, one in New York City, one in Los Angeles. Her work started selling. There was then this PR machine in place. People became more and more aware of her. And for her, it was the first time she had extra money. And that's amazing. And then, from 86, doing these exhibitions all the way up to 105, she, which is way past, the time most people decide, or don't decide, but check out in one way or another. So it's amazing.
Was she a working artist till the end, till 105 years old?
Yeah, right around 104, the doctor, her doctor didn't want her to go out to the pottery studio. He was afraid she would fall. And in all due respect, I kind of disagree with that, because she told this woman, Gail Cotman, who's a good friend, a mutual friend, that she was basically like Peter Pan. As long as she could work, she would still be alive. But she continued to do the drawings and such right up to the end.
Tell us a little bit about her, the early life. I guess the early life. Let's start with a little bit of early life, because she was a rebellious teenager, and she came from the family, pretty wealthy family that could have given her whatever she wanted. And at some point, her mother even encouraged her to, pursue whatever she wanted, but and even, pay for the tutors and everything. But for whatever reason, for Beatrice, it did not work. So she had that chance to be supported by the family money on the career path of being an actress. But something went the other way, and that was 100% her choice. That's something that was very intriguing for me when I was reading about it.
Right. Well, she said from the time she was a child, she knew at some point she'd have to run away from home. She sort of felt like she knew she did not belong in this place with these people. And her mother, it kind of was a difficult relationship. So her mother wanted her, when Beatrice Wood said, I want to be an artist, her mother was like, well, we have to do this the proper way. She was very much about society. And that's how she ended up going to Giverny, which is where Monet was still living, and she would spy on him in his garden. And she went to a fashionable art school because that was the proper thing to do. But she sort of messed that up by running away from her governess and installing herself. She wanted to live in a garret like a real artist, and her mother found out and came and got her and took her out of the art school. And then when she said, oh, I want to be an actress on the stage, which at that time was not something a proper young woman did, her mother said, well, you have to do this properly. So she enrolled in the Comédie Française, where she acted on the same stage as Sarah Bernhardt, danced before Nijinsky, got all this training. And then World War I came along, and she really wanted to stay and help the French people and stay there. And everybody was like, no, young lady, you need to go back to America. And she was sort of forced to go back to America, where Marcel Duchamp and all these other people came. And because she spoke fluent French, she fell in with this audience or this group of individuals. Very soon after meeting her, Marcel Duchamp gave her the keys to a studio and basically tutored her, which changed her life.
Can you tell us a little bit about their relationships? How did they meet, and how did that progress?
Beatrice Wood was told about a French man with a broken leg who had no one to talk to because he spoke only French. So his name was Edgar Grève, and he was a composer. And she went and visited with him. And then the second time she went to visit him, Marcel Duchamp was standing at the foot of the bed, and they were introduced. And she said, she believed this to the very end, that Marcel Duchamp was the most handsome, charming, intelligent man in the whole world. So she was in love with him. In love with him. There's a new book out by Ruth Brandon about those years, and it points to this idea that it was inconvenient for Duchamp to have this woman in love with him. And so he did what he could to give her over to his friend Henri Pierre Rocher, because he knew that Rocher was a man that loved women, was a sort of serial lover of women. And then so they had a relationship. And then, like all the men in Beatrice Wood's life, Rocher cheated on her. And so, and like, as in all of her relationships, she sort of said, okay, that's the end of our romantic part of our relationship. But she actually managed to remain friends with every one of these individuals, lifelong friends. But then it was after that she and Duchamp got together. But he wasn't really, it wasn't something that was going to work for Marcel Duchamp, an ongoing relationship. But
he's not a long-term material.
He wasn't married material, at least not at that point. He ended up marrying Tini Matisse, but that was much later. So they had this lifelong, in her autobiography, she doesn't talk about Duchamp. She talks about Marcel, and that they were friends, and that they were, they corresponded for decades. It was a different time when people stayed connected. I think we're very fragmented today because of the internet and social media. There was a time when you had a very close family and friends, and that was her life. So
what influence Marcel Duchamp had on her development as an artist?
Well, her favorite artist at the time was Maxfield Parrish, who she thought was really remarkable. And she loved, he tried to convince her that art is not about technique. It's not about doing things right. It's not about being impressive in any way. He challenged her to what they call today think outside the box, but basically it's just to become very loose with her work and very free. And so he would come in, she would work in the studio, and then he would come in at the end of the day and they'd lay out the drawings. She throughout her life, she worked with graphite, watercolor, gouache, colored pencil on paper. That was what she did. And he would kind of go through the paintings and say, good, bad. And he would do everything he could to discourage her from a really well-crafted drawing, one that he felt she was sort of showing off her technique or something like that. And the work that was more from the subconscious, that was more raw, that was simpler, was what he, encouraged her to follow up on. And this is something that years later, when she became a ceramicist, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but this is important. She learned how to be a proper potter. She learned all the rules. She studied with the very best, Otto and Gertrude Natzler, and then the Hanos and different people that were really at the top of their game and perfectionists. And so if you look at her work from that time, it was very tight, very controlled. But with time, those lessons of Duchamp informed her ceramics, and she became very loose and very free, which led a lot of people to think she didn't know what she was doing in ceramics, because she didn't follow the proper rules. And strangely, the number one influence on American ceramics or ceramics in the West is Eastern ceramics. And she wasn't really interested in those traditions. She went a completely different way with her work and was very influenced by folk art and naive art. And so that all was born out of these, what she learned from Duchamp.
Yeah, her ceramics is very interesting. And I personally have that, a vision of so-called quote unquote ugly art, is that you have to be a wonderful artist to make ugly things, but knowing what you're doing, that will actually speak to people, because it's totally different. Just naive work or work from someone who has never done that feels differently. But when you are an experienced artist, when you possess the skills, when you know exactly what you're doing, and you consciously turn away from the perfectionism, it absolutely makes all the difference in the world. And that's what her ceramics feel to me.
Yeah, and it's not easy to do. I know that the abstract expressionists that studied art all said the first thing they had to do is try to unlearn stuff, paint blindfolded, paint with their non-dominant hand, loosen up and lose some of that. And my career in the arts actually began with outsider art. And so with outsider art, with legitimate outsider art, you're dealing with people that not only have no training, but are sort of marginal as far as their lifestyles and their way of thinking. And so they are naturally very loose. But once you've been educated, and she was educated, and she continued, she believed she encouraged people to educate their eyes, go to the great museums, look at beautiful things. But at the same time, what attracted her was to be very loose and very free and very primitive. She sort of forced herself to be, as she put it, unschooled in her sculptural work.
I have a couple of questions about her personal life as well. I know that she was romantically involved with some fascinating people, absolutely amazing artists, Marcel Duchamp being one of them. But she was married twice, and both of the marriages, the latter one lasted for almost 60 years, if I am not mistaken. Both of them were not about love or romantic relationships at all. They were out of convenience.
Right. And a lot of people, there's a sexist presumption with a lot of beautiful women that become artists and such, that they marry or have boyfriends or that are wealthy and support them. For Beatrice Wood, that was never the case. It was sort of quite the opposite. So her first marriage was an attempt to get away from her mother. So she married this gentleman named Paul, who was a theater manager. And it turned out he had a gambling problem, was borrowing money from her friends and from her family, and never came, on their honeymoon, she would put on her nightie and was in bed waiting for him. And he never came in the bedroom and didn't seem to have any interest in her. And it turned out he was using her. And it turned out he was a bigamist. He already had a wife in Europe. So that marriage was annulled and never consummated. The second marriage was to a gentleman named Steve Hogue, who she was not physically attracted to or romantically attracted to, but he was an accountant and good with money, and she did not like dealing with money. So she really wanted somebody to help her, advise her in that way and to help her in that way. So they actually ended up. He advised her they should invest in a house together in North Hollywood. They bought a house together, and he would do his accounting practice there, and she had her studio there, and everything was fine until this giant rainstorm came, and a lot of the homes in the area were destroyed. They sort of washed off their foundations, which was the case here. And they found out that the married couples in the neighborhood were getting money from the Red Cross to rebuild, and they got married in order to do that, which led to them being able to fix that house back up, sell it, and then Steve did not want her to do this. He was trying to advise her, but she went and bought a lot in Ojai and then built her home in Ojai. And she was a very loyal person. So she and Steve actually lived together for decades. Nobody knew that they were married. She would refer to, he swore all the time and embarrassed her. So she would refer to him as the gardener or the help. But up until he died, she made sure he was cared for.
That's interesting. Especially, I remember you said something about her personality that kind of stuck with me, that the young boys and chocolate kind of get her in the mood, or like what was the thing that you said?
Well, when people would ask her the secrets of her longevity, she would say art books, young men, and chocolates. And it's true. I think you went back to her library. She had a massive art book collection, and everybody that would come to visit her would bring her chocolate. They knew that she had this tremendous love for chocolate. The young men was sort of this naughty thing that she liked to talk about. And she was a lifelong Dadaist. I mean, she was flirtatious. I mean, she flirted with me when I met her. She was 90 something, and she was known for that. But it was sort of, I don't want to, there's a lot of people that believe she had all these young, handsome lovers, and I think she likes that everybody believed that that was happening. But she was not a promiscuous woman, and she definitely equated love and sex as needing to be part of the same thing. The reason her autobiography is called "I Shock Myself" is because she was this romantic young woman who was just looking for love and ended up with all these bohemians that were convinced that sex and love were two different things, and tried to convince her of that. And up until her 90s, in her 90s, she basically said, I'm starting to think my knight in shining armor is not going to ride up on a white horse and sweep me away. And she always said that she would give everything up, her career and everything, for true love. Mm-hmm. So she was romantic, despite all the rumors.
Not only that, but also she had a very, very deep spiritual life.
Mm-hmm. She was a lifelong theosophist. She knew from a young age, and this may have been because of her relationship with her mother and everything, that she was looking for something. She was unhappy. Her mother made her very unhappy, but she was looking for something. And so she looked into a lot of different spiritual sources and such. And then theosophy worked for her. And she became a follower of J. Krishnamurti, who the theosophists at one point believed was going to be this great world teacher. And that's what took her to Ojai. And so the theosophists believed, their motto is there's no religion higher than truth. And they study all the world religions and look for that central truth in them. So the big difference between, theosophists, if you walk into a New Age bookstore, everything that you're going to find in there is stuff that the theosophists were looking into. The difference is they weren't like, I got my kind of New Age. They weren't kind of like, I got this Zen thing. I feel kind of like this. They were like, no, you read these texts, you study the texts, you actually do the work of understanding all these things. So she was, today when we think of yoga, we think of asanas. I'm going to go take a yoga class and physical practice. But at her time, that was not as big a part of it as the quieting the mind and learning to master the emotions, the mind, the body, and such. And so, she was very deep, but she didn't like to proselytize. So she wouldn't try to lead you down any of those paths at all. She knew what worked for her, and so she didn't. That wasn't something she spent a lot of time talking about, but she was studying all of that throughout her life, right up to the end.
And that, in part, what eventually brought her to be a guardian of this land, right? The Happy Valley Foundation.
Right. Well, she built her home. She was invited to build her home on foundation land, so it would one day become the Art Center, which was part of Annie Besant's 1927 vision for the land. And those were the happiest years of her life, being there on the land. Interestingly, she avoided being like on the board of the foundation. She avoided, all the political stuff, all the stuff having to do with the management of it. She avoided, but she was very much. These were her people, and these were the people she was closely aligned with and knew for decades. And so she ended up living on this wonderful 500 acres of land. With the high school there, and her best friend running the high school and the foundation.
So she and Annie Besant were practically best friends.
Well, she was a follower of Annie Besant. Annie Besant was much older than her, and Annie Besant was one of the great orators of the 19th century and a force to be reckoned with. So she'd met Annie Besant many times, but I would say it's more that Annie Besant was her hero than that they were friends per se. And similarly with Krishnamurti, Annie Besant adopted Krishnamurti and basically took over preparing him for his role as they saw it. But Beatrice Wood's age was closer to Krishnamurti's. They were. It's hard, difficult now, because you see her at 105, but she was a younger woman, and these were the elder people that were part of her life.
Let's take a short coffee break. This podcast is the passion project that I produce and finance myself. If you want to support the show, you are welcome to volunteer, but the easier way is to just buy me a coffee. There's a link for it in the show notes and on our website, intheartscene.com. Thank you for your support. Tell us a little bit about the foundation itself, because right now we're talking about Beatrice Wood Center for Art, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, like a absolutely new person to this whole story and to Beatrice Wood and her art and her legacy. To me, this is what it is. This is what Happy Valley is. But it did not start this way, and it did not intend to be just an art center named after Beatrice Wood, right? So can you tell us a little bit of the story of the foundation, how it came about, what it was designed to be, what it is like right now, and how come Beatrice Wood was invited, and what was her role initially?
Well, in 1927, Dr. Annie Besant arranged for the purchase of the 500 acres, and she was somebody that people respected so much. She was a powerful, like I said, she was a great orator. People had a lot of respect for her. So money came from all over the world. Some people gave like $5, somebody would give $100, and they all pulled together to buy this land. Now, at the time, they believed that Krishnamurti was going to be this great world teacher. Basically, the same spirit was supposed to come down into him that was in Buddha and in Christ, and he was going to be all that. And Happy Valley was going to be the sort of the New Jerusalem or something. The center of all this stuff. 1929, he rejected that role and basically gave up that. And so that was a kind of big hit because that was a big central part of the whole plan. But Annie Besant's 1927 fundraising text also said that the plans included a school and an art center. So Rosalind Rajagopal, who was Beatrice Wood's best friend, was there when Annie Besant had this vision in 1927. and really made it her life mission to follow through Dr. Besant's vision to the extent they could. So it was obviously a foundation that had to start reinventing itself like 2 years after it started, because Krishnamurti walked away from the whole plan. But and then there was the Great Depression and First World War. So it wasn't really till the early 70s that things started happening up there. That's when they moved the school and built the school up there. That's when Beatrice Wood was invited to live up there. Rosalind built her house up there, the two houses right next to each other. And today, and there were a lot of theosophists involved in the beginning and Krishnamurti followers. Today, the foundation is much more pragmatic. We don't have theosophists and Krishnamurti followers. But the sort of the central tenets of what Dr. Besant wanted, as far as the whole idea, can be summarized by creating a better world. And today, the foundation seeks to do that through the individual by creating and helping to form better individuals through education and the arts. You can help to make the world a better place, because then they go on and they, do the same, hopefully. And so it's a fairly simple, make the world a better place, help humanity, critical thinking, all of that is what's central today to the foundation. And we have a board meeting this coming Saturday. So we're still very, that's the center is the small activity. It's, basically my wife and I run that. The school is a rather large activity with around 100 students and such. So most of it focuses on them.
And the school it's a art related school. Is it what kind of school is that?
The plans for the school were sketched out by Aldous Huxley and J. Krishnamurti for Socratic education for small class sizes. And the motto of the school, which Aldous Huxley gave the school, is "Anam Prendo," which means I'm still learning. So the idea is a lifetime of learning. So the idea of the small class size and Socratic education is, in a normal high school classroom, you may have 30 students. I've heard that there are sometimes are more. So you can do what I did, which is hide in the back and not hope you don't get picked on. In a class size of 6 students, you're part of the conversation. So you get what's being taught at whatever level you're able to get it. And of course, today we understand that a lot of people learn differently. There's kinesthetic learners. There's people, if you have ADD, you're sometimes you're running faster than everybody else. Sometimes you're running slower than other people. And so it's a really great school for helping people that are needing that sort of attention. You can't slip through the cracks there. You're basically involved, and they're really looking at the whole person in the way that the Annie Besant's vision called for.
That sounds amazing. I'm curious why J. Krishnamurti walked away in 1929 from the whole idea, because his entire upbringing, he was adopted as a kid, mm-hmm. and he was raised as that spiritual leader. So his entire life was kind of dedicated to it. And then all of a sudden, he, being a young man still, he decided that he doesn't want to be involved in this.
Right. Well, they made a big mistake in preparing him to take on this role. They did their best to educate him as far as wisdom and the world wisdom traditions and such. But they had a lot of esoteric beliefs and what they called at the time occult beliefs. They believed that they were being psychically guided by masters in the Himalayas, and that and a lot of the stuff, as time went on, Krishnamurti became disenchanted with it. He had his doubts about the whole thing. He loved Dr. Besant, who he basically referred to as his mother, Amma, I guess would be. And so he didn't want to break her heart. I think he put off leaving the organization for as long as he could, but eventually he just had to. He had a sort of like when the time came to make him step up and be this thing, he called the whole thing off.
So he basically turned out to be more of a critical thinker than they anticipated.
Right, exactly. And he continued to teach and speak and write books and such, but he was very much against religious authority or anybody having any authority. Central to his teaching was that he wanted to set humans completely free of all dogma and thought, and be able to think for themselves. And so that's what he sought to do. So, so yeah, so he did it his way.
Which in a way kind of aligns with the theosophy.
Right? It ultimately aligns with what his original role was, but he basically got rid of all of the esoteric thought and any systems of thinking. And he did a lot with dialogues. And even when he spoke in public, he didn't come with a big prepared plan. He would go up on the stage, sit in a chair, and say, "What should we talk about today?" And just sort of work through, and talk. But what he really loved doing were dialogues with other individuals in different fields, whether it's science or the different religions or whatever it was. Say this, he'd be sort of like, let's work this out. If an individual came to him and said, tell me, what should I do with my life? He'd basically say, how should I know what you should do with your life? But let's talk about this, and let's do that. So he's a very interesting individual. It's a very interesting teaching. What he did with his life and how he did it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's very interesting how all those different things in the spiritual community and the art community all kind of intervene and kind of came together in the personality of Beatrice Wood, because I guess maybe it's in a way that you set up the center and you're running it. It kind of becomes that, a crossroad of all those things coming together, as a Beatrice Wood legacy. Because she was
the crossroad herself. Yeah. So that's what we try to get across. And I'd say her two great teachers were Marcel Duchamp and Krishnamurti. And while they seem to be completely different as far as their fields and such, they had real similarities. I mean, basically, Marcel Duchamp changed the art world with the ready-made, with the work called Fountain, and really just turned it all on its head. And Krishnamurti did the same thing in terms of spirituality. Realistically, all of his work, all of his books from the time he went off on his own, the decades, there is no spirituality involved really as in the religious or spiritual thinking, but much more about looking within and sorting it out for yourself and critical thinking. And so he did a very similar thing to the sort of spiritual thing that Duchamp did to art.
Broken through the box.
Yeah, yes.
So Beatrice Wood being a crossroad of both of those ideas in the spiritual world and the art world, being a strong-willed individual herself, living this amazing legacy behind and really great art. We were walking around the center and around her house and the studio, and we found a lot of little things like letters on the wall and other things. What you as a director and curator, what things really stand out to you? What are your favorite quirky things about Beatrice Wood that you collected over time or you were looking after?
Well, you see, I was brought in first of all, I did the museum exhibition. So I kind of went through the archives and said, well, I don't want it to be just her artwork. I want it to be her photo albums. I want it to be things from her studio. I want it to be the way she lived, her folk art collection, all of that. I wanted to bring you into her world. And so that's what we've really worked with the center. So quite often, people comment, my gosh, there's so much here. There's so much to see, because it's pretty packed with everything from her books to letters to, historical photographs, her work, the folk art. There's so much there. But I think it's really, we do our best to kind of capture her personality. So I think what people experience in the house and in the studio is Beatrice Wood. And there's so much to take away from it. The other thing is, over the pandemic, one of my projects was creating a lot of didactic panels about other people in her life, because, it's not like, oh, she was fascinating and she was like weird in that. Everybody she was surrounded with, everybody that she knew, they were fascinating people at the top of their game, and they were movers and shakers in their respective fields. So I try to share those people because it's interesting. I'm always researching. I write books and I write articles and essays, and there's a whole bunch of history that just doesn't exist on the web because it happened before the internet. For instance, I ran a gallery from 1991 to 2000, and right now I want to do a project where I talk about it. There's no images of that gallery and the work we were exhibiting stuff online because it wasn't happening there. And similarly, a lot of people involved in Beatrice Wood's life, she acted on the stage, for instance. There's no footage. There's no recordings. It's as though, there's this whole world that basically has disappeared. And so I want to bring people back into seeing this larger world and the connections and such. So that's part of what's about.
Yeah, I think you're doing an amazing job of, creating this complexity of one individual's life, being seen and experienced by other people who are visiting the center. Because usually what happens is you're taking a book of biography of some kind of artist, and it's a very linear kind of a story, and there are some major relationships and major influences mentioned in the book, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I kind of get it. But then there's so much more into it. Like my personal, I don't know if I can say favorite, but the thing that kind of struck me and kind of stuck with me after visiting the center was a letter that Beatrice Wood wrote to Bill Clinton after the scandal with Monica Lewinsky happened, and his response, which was, her letter was, this heartfelt, compassionate. She offered, support, a shoulder practically. And his response was, I think it was probably written by someone else, and they probably didn't even read what she sent them. Like, we appreciate the support of our party, and we're working for our citizens, that kind of stuff. Right. So that was very interesting to me, like her attempt communicating about the very personal thing that happened to a person, not a president of the United States, a person, and what he's struggling with, and her being compassionate about that, and getting this absolutely dry, flat official response. So that's like that alone kind of made me feel like that she is not a kind of a biography book artist person, but there was so many things happening inside her. She was really feeling, she was really trying to be involved and helping, and it's just yeah. I think you're doing an amazing job showcasing that.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, her real interests were people and relationships, and quite often the relationships between men and women being in many ways completely different, coming at relationships in different ways and experiencing it differently. She was fascinated by that. She just found that fascinating. So I think the Bill Clinton letter is a good example of that, her way of looking at the situation and reaching out. And of course, it would have been just not smart to respond to her where she was taking it for Bill Clinton in a way, because that, any political advisor would say, no, we don't want this written. We don't want you saying this or writing this, but yeah, that was her thing. She was this amazing humanitarian, but really interested in people. I mean, that's what impressed me when I went to visit her. She was really interested in the people that came to see her and what they were all about. And I think that although we work to make the center a representative of Beatrice Wood and her world, she wouldn't want to be put on a pedestal in any way or promoted in the way that most artists are promoted as being, brilliant or whatever. That was not who she was. There's an interview with her where the interviewer says, well, what would you say to people that say you're an inspiration to them? That she'd say, well, I think they're crazy. She says, I'm just a person living my life the way I feel is right. I'm not setting out to do that at all. So So she had, when I was a kid, they had a saying, you have your head screwed on straight. She definitely had her head screwed on straight.
Yeah, well, she definitely knew how to live her life the way she felt right.
She did on her terms, completely on her own.
Absolutely. And it also it shows in the center because you're promoting so many local artists. Mm-hmm. Like I see in your background that hand knit sculpture that I was also fascinated by. You have a virtual background behind you with the hand knit life-size doll that is a self-portrait of one of the local Ojai artists, and you have when we visited there was an incredible exhibition of local artists from Ojai area. So yeah, I see how Center is actually really working on bringing a light, shedding the light onto other artists.
Yes, the local community, and there's worlds within worlds and communities within communities. So we do what we can to show the local, ceramic guild, the local Ojai artists nonprofit, these various groups, the hand weavers and spinners guild. We because my experience is in what's called craft or studio craft and craft media, which really people can connect with differently than art. I have a hatred of art, so-called art speak, that language that's designed to kind of alienate the majority of people from the art world, because I really want people to engage with art. So for me, ceramics and wood and fiber and these media that everyday normal people can approach and do, and that really run all the way across the world and all the way through civilization, that we've been media we've been working in from the beginning of being humans. I like that, and I like to be able to exhibit as many different people in the community and involve people in the arts. And we do our workshops. I want people to engage with the arts. I believe, we need outlets. We need ways of communicating. We need all of that. And for me, the arts are that.
So do you mostly work with local artists from Ojai area, or?
I'd say more the Ventura County, so the basic area, yeah, and also I've been in the art business a while, and shipping has gotten really expensive. So, say for instance, you want to do an exhibition, and normally an exhibition lasts about 6 weeks or so. That's a lot of money to ship and then ship back and everything. And even when we're on Artsy, and when somebody orders something, we need to ship it to them. I'm always shocked by what it costs to send art now. So by working and promoting the local artists, that's also, we work on a very tight budget. So that allows us to, people come and drop it off, and then if it doesn't sell, they come and pick it up. It simplifies. I like to keep things as simple as I can. And I hate paperwork and bureaucracy. So it's a way of just, anything you can do in your life to simplify, I'm all for, because life is complicated enough as it is, and with internet and social media and Zoom, it can get very busy and can sometimes become very fragmented. So I'm about let's focus. And
well, nonetheless, I would like you to tell our listeners how they can find you online, offline, and if they want to support Beatrice Wood Center for Art, how can they do that?
Yes. Well, as far as support goes, it's a fascinating thing. I was brought in with an understanding that there was a little bit of seed money, but that I was going to be responsible for making the place work financially. And I'd been in the gallery business. I figured, okay, we'll sell art, we'll make this work. It's been more challenging than it hasn't been necessarily easy. And there's never been a time when we have more than 6 months of funding in the bank. Basically, we operate with who knows what's going. It's like we don't know what the future holds. However, for 17 years now, it's somehow worked, and that's despite these incredible challenges, like the 2008 financial crisis happened right after we started the center. Basically, people stopped spending money for a few years. People lost their homes, they lost their jobs, things changed. We had the Thomas fire, which was a wildfire that basically burned everything around us, and even caught our roof on fire. But we survived. It's sort of like, it's sort of like we have invisible helpers, and we may, and Beatrice Wood's beliefs and then the beliefs of the early Happy Valley Foundation. That was sort of something we counted on. So, but yes, we need any help we can to get to continue to fund it ourselves. We mostly get funding from smaller foundations that can give a few $1,000s, individuals that can give $30, $50. And we have a membership program that starts with $30. And I like that because I like people to be part of our community. I believe that community is so important. And so I want to involve people and do that. So we have a website, beatricewood.com, which is a way of getting a hold of us. Our phone number is the same phone number that Beatrice Wood had for decades, which I find fascinating. I've had people where I've called them to get in touch with them about something that knew Beatrice Wood years ago, and they said, "This is so weird. Beatrice Wood's name came up on my phone. I'm like, I can't believe she's calling me. She's been gone for 30 years." And so that number is 805-646-3381. Our email address is beatricewoodcenter@gmail.com. And people should come and visit. I mean,
I will make sure to leave all that information and more in the show notes. So
Great.
we have a blog post coming up with every single episode, and I will make sure that everything we were talking about, all the references, some photographs, the address, web address, email address, and the phone number, everything is listed. And is that correct that people can just get a hold directly of you and communicate with you about how they can help and how they can get involved if they want to?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, and we are at the top of the hour. Is there anything else that you would like to add to what we were talking about?
Well, I want to thank you. This has been great. The fact that you got the center, that you because it's so important to me that people can, connect in that way. And I'm so glad you got it. And then you wanted to do this. So thank you so much for that.
Well, it is my pleasure. 100%. A couple of years ago, I had the same kind of a experience discovering Corita Kent for myself. So, which was also fascinating. And I dove down to learn about her story and how she became who she became. And she was also very influential in the way that she was a famous artist for some time, like a relatively short period, a couple of decades, and then the whole thing just disappeared after she passed away. And I think that this is so unfortunate because you don't have to be a Marcel Duchamp of the art world to be influential and live behind amazing legacy, which is, more than 50% a humanitarian than actual, artistic, creative legacy. And whatever creative legacy that's left behind by whether Corita Kent or Beatrice Wood is all about being humans, connecting with one another, right?
Yes, it's a human experience, and these people can teach us so much. Just seeing how somebody else lived their life, to see what they created, there's so much to be learned from it.
Yeah, and that's what kind of, I don't know. I guess that's that kind of speaks to my personal values, and not only because they were women and they were kind of forgotten, but also because this is a different side of the art world. And that's the side that I think we all should experience.
Yes.
Because ultimately, like what you started this conversation with, that's all it is about. Everyone should be exposed to art because art is the way of making the world a better place, making us better humans, and connecting with one another.
Well, there's that saying that once the mind is stretched, it never returns to its original size. And for me, the arts do that. They just expand our experience of being a human.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us a really great tour and observation of Beatrice Wood's life and her legacy. And yes, everyone who's listening, please share this episode with everyone you know. Go to Ojai. This is an amazing place. If you are a creative person or if you're just in love with arts, there are plenty of places to stay, and it's an incredible nature, and Beatrice Wood Center for Arts is right there.
Indeed.
Everyone should visit it. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple and go listen to other great stories. Check out our website intheartscene.com or follow us on Instagram at intheartscene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the Art Scene.